This is Jerry Boyer for townhall.com. The Supreme Court just ruled on the Harvard affirmative action case, as well as a similar one involving higher education. But this isn't just about higher ed. This will be an earthquake in the world of corporate DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Companies that promise numerical outcomes, quotas essentially, for race and gender for their employees are going to find themselves on the defense in the court of public opinion and in actual courts as well. When the court reaffirmed the Constitution's requirement for equal protection for all persons, it put reverse discrimination on legal notice. This puts companies that embrace these...
The following program is sponsored by the law offices of Patrick L. Smith. This is the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. Get ready with your legal questions and call Patrick now. 877-943-9673. Again, that's 877-943-9673. The law office is open. And now your host, Patrick Smith.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith, and happy 4th of July weekend, everyone. We hope everyone stays safe while you're out there celebrating this wonderful nation of ours and the birth of this great nation of ours. So feel free to call in if you want to sing the praises of our great United States of America in any way, along with your legal questions. But happy 4th of July weekend, everyone. 877-943-9673. Again, that's your live and local studio line to be part of today's show. 877-943-9673. You can give us a call now with any legal question at all. I'm Attorney Patrick Smith, local Central Florida attorney offices throughout the state to better serve you, including Clearwater, Sarasota, Sun City Center, Claremont offices all over the state of Florida to help you. 877-943-9673 is your number to call in now to the law office and be part of our live broadcast every Saturday morning where we can answer your legal questions absolutely free of charge. 877-943-9673. And as always, you can email your questions, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. Again, that email address, which is good 7 days a week, but an hour a week. We answer your email questions live on the show. That email address, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. And today is Saturday, July 1st. And Bianca, the intern, is that significant for any reason, Saturday, July 1st?
It is very important. So today there's going to be a lot of new laws enacted in Florida today. At the top of the list is the new permitless carry, which we'll be talking about today.
That's right. So today is a very special day as our new permitless carry or constitutional carry law goes into effect in the great state of Florida. Now, Bianca, you've been working diligently and preparing for this presentation. This is actually your first time on radio, so you're a rookie to radio, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing. But this particular legislation has a backdrop, which is the Second Amendment. So talk to me a little bit about how the Second Amendment... Okay, first of all, Bianca or Lexi, the intern, can either of you recite what the Second Amendment says, word for word? Lexi's scratching her head, so I'm going to take that as a no. So, all right, so Bianca, why don't we just start with what is the Second Amendment?
Definitely. So we'll just go ahead and start with what it says. So it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So that is the Second Amendment verbatim.
So you mentioned a free state. Talk to me about that. What does that mean? Let's break it down by its elements.
Definitely. Okay. So a free state. The origin of the Second Amendment does have some different interpretations, even since the writings of it. So Alexander Hamilton in Federalist Paper number 29 said that militias are organized by states and regulated by states. James Madison, who wrote the Second Amendment in his first draft, said that it was intended for men to render military service. And George Mason said that it was just, who was one of the founding fathers, said that it's just the American people as a whole. So really, since the beginning, there have been different interpretations of it. I guess just choose your marble.
So ab initio, the Second Amendment, controversial amendment, debatable as far as interpretations go. Talk to me a little bit about, since this is so obviously firearms related, the historical context, and then we'll prepare to sort of spring forward into our current legislation, but talk to me about the historical context of the Second Amendment.
Okay. So, Second Amendment is part of our Bill of Rights, and I would say that the Bill of Rights is a huge chunk of the context of the historical context for the Second Amendment. So we'll just back it up all the way. When we gained independence from Great Britain, we needed a government. And the way we did that is that we meshed a bunch of ideas together in order to make everyone happy. But spoiler alert, people still weren't happy. And so we created the Bill of Rights to ensure that there were inalienable rights that everyone felt protected by, safe, and comfortable and confident in our new government. Something that I think is funny is that the First Amendment is the right to freedom of speech. So, okay, you can say almost what you want. This amendments are limitless. And then immediately after, the founding fathers said, okay, you should get a gun.
How many times during that debate do you think they used the phrase spoiler alert?
Probably not a lot.
I like how you modernize that a great deal. All right, so let's spring forward a little bit. So we have a little context, and I wanted Bianca to do that because a lot of people know that this is a backdrop against the Second Amendment. But again, a lot of people just need a refresher course. I know I do every now and again on our Bill of Rights, and that's your sort of Second Amendment refresher 101 per Bianca the intern. But springing forward to today, we're talking about House Bill 543, which is the new permitless carry or constitutional carry law. First of all, just tell me what permitless carry actually precisely means, because there's a lot of misinterpretation and misunderstanding about this particular piece of legislation.
Definitely, I agree. So before today, if someone wanted to conceal carry, they would have to apply for a license, take a mandatory class, and apply to get that permit. But now Floridians that are eligible to own a gun or are gun owners as it is can go ahead and conceal carry without having to go through that obstacle of getting a permit to do so.
But we're not the first state to do this.
No, we're the 26th state in the United States.
Becoming more and more popular. It seems like it's trending that way across the nation. And a lot of people think that today is the day that Florida becomes the Wild West. And Florida is now an open carry state. But that's not in fact accurate, is it, Bianca?
No, that's not true. So there is a big difference and a very distinct, bold line between open carry and concealed carry. Open carry means that, let's say I have a holster and my firearm is visible to the public. That would be open carry. So a state like Texas, for example. But Florida, the only difference would be your firearm is tucked in your pants and the public can't see that. So it will be more probable that if you're in a grocery store or a gas station, someone may have a firearm on them, but you wouldn't know because you wouldn't be able to see it.
Okay, so is this bill, this particular piece of legislation designed to, and theoretically, I realize how silly this question may sound, but it kind of demonstrates the point, to increase or decrease gun violence? Because it seems like it's one thing, but it's actually another in theory.
So this is a very interesting question. As we mentioned before, I feel like this is a very polarizing issue. And there are two opinions on whether or not this will increase or decrease gun violence. So I can tell a little personal story about when I was visiting my brother in Texas. I'm a much better person now, but a few years ago, I would have a little bit of road rage. And they don't drive very well.
We could do an entire show just on the road rage in this room, I'm sure. So, yeah.
I'm sure. But I remember I was in the car with my brother and, someone with lunatic was driving horribly. And I was getting a bit flustered. And my brother turned to me and he said, listen, when you're in Texas, you can't do that because you don't know if the person in that car is carrying. So there is a argument that if you know that the person you may be in altercation with or engaging with is carrying a firearm, you're less likely to engage in aggressive behavior.
All right. But this bill, while that's the working theory of deterring other gun violence, is the fact that, the presumption that people may be carrying. This doesn't broaden who can now possess firearms in any way, correct?
Correct. So that is like a huge misconception that I'm seeing right now. I do see that there are quite a few people that are scared or they think a really common phrase that I've been hearing is anyone can have a gun in Florida now, which just isn't true. So this does not change any of the eligibility requirements to own a firearm in Florida.
So under the implementation of House Bill 543, which goes into effect today for those of you just joining us, or the is also called the permitless carry law in the state of Florida. Bianca, just sort of wrapping up our initial discussion of the legislation, who still cannot own a firearm post House Bill 543?
Yeah, of course. A lot of things are staying the same. You still have to get a background check. There's still a 3-day waiting period. And the people that can't own a gun still include people who are convicted of a felony, fugitives from justice, a person who's addicted to controlled substance, a person who is mentally defective or has a untreated mental illness, someone who's who has been discharged from the U.S. Dishonorably. And some things that I think are really important, especially that make me feel more comfortable, is that someone that's been convicted of things like domestic violence, or if they have a restraining order held against them, it's people like I just listed who have those things. They are not allowed to own a gun.
So there you go. Some clarification on what the bill does and doesn't do, but I'm certainly not the expert in the room this morning on this, because I want to introduce our next guest. And Karen, I do see you. I'm going to get to you in just a moment, but I have to introduce our very special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show, Senator Jay Collins. Good morning, Jay.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. For those of you who aren't familiar with Jay, Jay is a hero, is a true American hero. And Jay served in the United States Army from 1995 to 2018, including as a member of the United States Army Special Forces. That's right. He's a Green Beret, folks. And as a Green Beret, Jay was deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, twice to South America. During his 2007 Afghanistan deployment, Collins was hit in the arm, continued fighting, and later helped perform surgery on himself in the field of battle. I was talking to Jay before the show and verified that story. It's a great story, and I'm sure we'll have time to get into that. And in addition to that, his military awards and decorations include the Combat Infantryman Badge, Master Parachutist Badge, Military Freefall Parachutist Badge, Legion of Merit, Soldier's Medal, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service, and numerous others. So, Jay, I think I speak for everyone when I say, first of all, thank you for your service as a member of the United States Army Green Beret, and thank you for your continued service as a state senator. Now, Bianca, you had no idea that Jay was going to be here today, did you?
No, I had no clue.
We like surprises here on the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. So, Jay, you are the authority as the sponsor in the Senate for House Bill 543. How do you think Bianca did describing the legislation?
Well, first off, Patrick, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. It was an absolute blessing to serve our nation. I am so grateful for the opportunities it presented me to be a small part of that really, truly amazing community. Bianca, you did good. You did good. I think you actually covered a lot of the key misinterpretations, perhaps, that are out there. This thing simply does not change who can carry. This is a very narrow step when it comes to our ability to carry and defend our family. So I think you did a fantastic job. Kudos.
All right, so let's shift gears and let's go take a call from Karen in Sun City Center. Karen, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. How are you today? Happy 4th of July weekend.
I'm doing great, thank you.
So what's your question this morning, Karen?
Well, my mother-in-law moved here from Washington State, and she has a will that was drafted in 2006 in Washington State. Is that will good here in Florida, or do we need to do something about it?
The general rule is wills and trust from state A are valid in any other state if they were ever valid in the state of origin. However, there can be a chasm of difference between validity and optimal efficiency. So what I recommend doing is when you switch between states, meet with your new state's counsel, an attorney in that state who's licensed for that state, not only to assess the validity of the instrument, but the optimal efficiency. So in other words, even if the document was valid in Washington or it was valid in Hawaii, switching and saying, now that we're in Florida, are there new homestead laws we should be taking advantage of? Which certainly there are. Florida has some very unique homestead provisions. So again, those updates don't make the document more valid necessarily, Karen, but they certainly make it more efficient.
Okay. And then a follow-up sort of related issue is she has her son who lives in Idaho has a power of attorney. And should her son here in Florida have that power of attorney, or is it okay to leave it with the one in Idaho?
That's up to mom. I mean, she can absolutely, yeah, it's completely a matter. The right answer there is whatever she wants. She could do one to either. She could do one to both. She could set it up so that one is first and the other is a backup. But the poll star that we look to there, Karen, is what did mom want? Not did so much what the family want. It's not so much a decision by committee. It should really be mom driving the decisions here.
Okay,
All right, Karen, I have a question for you. Do you own a firearm?
I do
All right. Do you carry it with you?
sometimes.
Okay. And do you have a CWP?
I do.
Okay. So, yeah. So how do you feel about this new legislation, which goes into effect today, which basically says it makes it easier for, law abiding citizens to carry without a permit?
I think my concern with it is the lack of training requirement. I don't like the idea of untrained people being able to carry concealed.
So, Jay, do you want to respond to that? What is your, because I mean, certainly as a Green Beret, you know your way around a firearm. Not everyone's a Green Beret. Not everyone's even served. Some people have never touched a firearm in their life. And that can be one of the most dangerous things about the potential for someone who's not educated, not trained. But I understand it that, and I'll let you speak to it directly, but I understand even some local law enforcement are holding training classes for people who want to educate themselves. So maybe speak to a little bit of Karen's concern.
No, absolutely. And Karen, we've heard this from many people. And first off, thank you for sharing that and your views and thoughts on this. Let's unpack it a little bit. I am a Green Beret. I've got tons of experience and have had opportunity to go to a lot of training courses across the country and the world. When I interpret the Constitution, it says it shall not be infringed. That's how I view this. That's how I hear it and how I see it. What we did in this bill does provide a parallel path. If you want to keep your permit, we actually advocate for that. That's great because it does give you reciprocity. And if you want to purchase a firearm, it does block that wait period. Ultimately, when it comes down to the training aspect of this, the training that was required for your CWP was minimal at best. In doing this, in talking to sheriffs, in talking to the police chiefs, in talking to the PBA, in talking to the Attorney General's office and everybody else, they all believed the same way we did on this. And here's where we got to in the discussion. I believe that the free market steps in. I believe that the sheriff's offices were going to step in and offer training. And I think you see that Sheriff Chronister doing that here in Hillsborough County has done a fantastic job. There are a million industries, it seems, across this country giving firearms training on a daily basis. You see those growing, diversifying, and providing an opportunity. I encourage everybody, go out there, train, understand what it is. But as we read our Constitution, the way you interpret this, whether it's a privilege or a right, I believe it is a right to bear arms. I believe this is the correct interpretation of this. And I highly encourage, just like we want people to go use their privilege to drive a car, learn how to drive it, get your training. When you use your right to bear arms, I want you to be trained. Take the time to know your gun, put rounds through it in a safe, knowledgeable way. And there are industries out there. I don't believe you're going to see a huge spike in the people who are going to carry on this. From what we've seen, those who carry, those who don't. And it's something that we're going to keep tabs on and watch as this goes through. But that is my view. That's how we see this. And that has actually been what's been happening across our state as we step into the July 1st timeframe as this bill becomes enacted. But I appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Karen, does that answer your question?
It does.
All righty. Well, Karen, we appreciate you calling in today and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And as I said, have a wonderful 4th of July, okay?
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. If you have a question, for those of you joining us just now, we're here in studio with Senator Jay Collins, District 14, right, Jay?
Yes, sir.
Representing District 14 right here in Tampa. And we're discussing the House Bill 543, which Jay sponsored in the Senate, which takes effect today, the new permitless carry law in the great state of Florida. 877-943-9673. So if you have a question for Senator Collins, myself, or the interns, Bianca, the intern, of course, handling our initial recital of sort of the facts of the backdrop of the Second Amendment to this legislation and this particular legislation's details. So 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673. You can give us a call now, live and local, and we'll get your question for Senator Collins, myself, and it can be any legal question at all. We'll be happy to help you any way we can this Saturday morning. Now, Jay, I remember researching this early because, Bianca, you've been working on this for well over a month now. So, and in researching it, I was looking at sort of the overlap. And if I'm not mistaken, for those who wanted to select to get a concealed weapon permit, if they also were in possession of a medical marijuana card, that would limit their ability to get a concealed weapon permit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So now under the new permitless carry law, those with medical cards are now permitted to carry?
The laws are exactly the same.
So nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
Is there either. So again, I think a lot of people have severe misconceptions that the law is somehow some overhauling and not rather a tweaking of Florida's existing law.
Yeah, if I may,
Please.
This law didn't affect who can carry in the slightest bit. If you were authorized to purchase a firearm before, you're authorized to purchase a firearm now. If you were authorized to carry concealed, now we have a parallel path to do so with the interpretation, as we discussed earlier. The exclusion zones around our state, they didn't change, right? None of that shifted.
So if there was one thing about the bill that you would have changed, whether it was in committee, from the floor, what's something that you would have modified or preferred to have seen different in this piece of legislation?
So, honestly, I think we ended up exactly where we needed to be for this. My views when it comes to firearms, I am a believer in more firearms for people in that regard. I believe in the direct interpretation of our Second Amendment. However, I also know that, like anything else, you need to take a graduated approach to this. And I believe this was a good middle ground step to get in there and show that this isn't going to be the Wild West, that you're not going to have anarchy in the streets because of this bill. And ultimately, when you talk about legislation, we often build legislation for the 1 or 2% of the people who are doing the wrong thing. This bill focuses on 98% of the people that do the right thing,
Lawful.
that are lawful citizens.
Yeah.
They want to protect their family. Ultimately, everything I do is to protect my family, our community, and leave things better than I got it. This bill allows me and other moms and dads and citizens to do the right thing to protect their family, using their Second Amendment rights. And then the school safety things we put in there ensure that when our children go to the schools, they're that much safer. So when we can't be there to protect them, we can have faith and trust that our schools are going to be that much safer, because in the end, what are we doing it for? It's for the next generation to pass those freedoms we love on.
Well, I mean, that is the hope, right? That we hand down the nation to the next
That's right.
generation better than when we received it from the preceding generation. 877-943-9673. This is the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. I'm your host, Attorney Patrick Smith, along with special guest Senator Jay Collins, we're all here to answer your legal questions this morning, discussing the new not open carry, but permitless or constitutional carry law. Give us a call now, 877-943-9673. Jay, we were talking a little bit before the show about what it means, constitutional carry. Maybe speak a little bit to that. What is constitutional carry?
So the name is just what it implies, right? It's the direct interpretation of our Second Amendment rights. You have a right to bear arms, and that shall not be infringed. Those are the things we focus on. And yes, Bianca, you're 100% right. There are different interpretations. There are many different views on that. I believe that you do not need to have the government permission slip to ultimately carry in a concealed fashion. I think this bill is really what it focuses on. And to your point, Bianca, there are a lot of different variations of constitutional carry across the states, right? As you do this, we are the 26th state to do this. Everyone's just a little bit different. This is Florida's interpretation. We put it on paper and we built this into a robust safety package for the state. It's that simple. I think sometimes we overcomplicate this because of fear or misunderstanding, and it's very interpret the Constitution.
Are you implying that mainstream media might mislabel what a bill is actually designed to do?
Yeah, I will say from time to time, we may not get clarity in the
Have we
messaging.
ever seen this before?
Well, we may have experienced this a time or two. That being said, thank you for the chance to use our voice here.
Right. And that's the point. I think that, it's so easy in modern media now to speak in 20-second sound bites and think if it's good for a TikTok or good for an Instagram post, then it must be true. And so much in politics and in life, perception is reality. So whether it's true or not, if people believe it's so, that's going to stick. And that's why I think it's so empowering what we were talking about before about kind of the difference between being silent and being quiet. And so like you said, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, but this was Jay's point we were talking about when we said, when you're being quiet, people are waiting to hear what you're going to say. So you guys, the sponsors of this legislation, we're just being quiet and sitting back and listening. And now you're taking the time to speak and to meet that expectation and say what these people were waiting to hear.
Well, it's a couple of things. As a Green Beret, we do call ourselves a quiet professionals, but in practice, quite often we found ourselves silent. When you're silent, people speak for you. The tone and the message is lost. When you're quiet, people do wait to hear you speak. And as a veteran, it's something that I'm passionate about, that we have to use our voice. We have to help be a positive influence and push things forward. Ultimately, this is the same way. There was a lot of misrepresentation. There was a lot of emotion tied to this. But when we take a step back, breathe, and we look at what's actually on the paper and what this bill does, it's not as scary as some would tell you. It's very clear, very straightforward, and it's a direct interpretation as we discussed. And then what we did in the school safety package, it's pretty remarkable. And I keep bringing that up, but I want to discuss what we're doing here. Ultimately, our Guardian program was extended to be allowed for private schools as well. That's important, right? Why should we differentiate between public and private schools? Now, it is on them for the dime with the private schools. We took our behavioral health assessment programs and ensured two things. One, that if a child has been identified and they need a little bit of love and they transfer, that'll go through a portal that doesn't keep that data locked in place and follows the child to make sure they get the help they need, if they need it, to be successful and move on and have a great life. But one thing it did is it tied it to Florida-specific rules and laws and thoughts. What we do in Florida is so different and so unique and heads and tails above other states. We had to adjust that. And the last part that I think is really noteworthy is we created the Safe School Canine program. Think of these as labradoodles with a side job, right? Is the way I like to jokingly explain it. These aren't Belgian Malinois. They're not attack dogs. They're dogs that can sniff gunpowder, can sniff guns.
Is it okay if in my mind they're still Belgian Malinois because it's a better imaginative experience for me?
It is. Okay. It can be a Belgian Malinois, but it's a public-private partnership, right? It's providing opportunities.
Belgian with a Labradoodle.
It may be both.
Okay,
we'll see. It could be both. We'll see. We'll see how this rolls out. But ultimately, it's a chance for the community to come in, help, pay for the dog, help, sponsor the dog, feed the dog, name the dog, and it gives more transparency, more opportunities for interaction. Our community needs to be a part of that. They need to go see this. And ultimately, what it does, these dogs are very good at sniffing out gunpowder, and it keeps our children that much safer. Ultimately, I want our schools to work like Fort Knox without necessarily having to look like Fort Knox.
Right. You don't want to have your kids going through metal detectors to get into their schools,
That's
basically.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I think that's a great point about this legislation, is the arm of the legislation that is specifically designed to extend protections for our children, especially in schools, which is, something that's obviously in the news all the time, all too unfortunately, about active shooters at schools and things of that nature, and the amount of student on student violence, period. So anything to make our children safer in schools, I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's a great idea to include that in this particular piece of legislation. Next, we're going to go to Sarasota and we're going to talk to Cheryl. Cheryl, welcome to the Attorney Patrick Smith Show. How are you today, Cheryl?
Well, how are you doing? I hope you're having yourself a good day, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful 4th of July.
Well, same to you, Cheryl. What station are you listening on?
I think this is The Answer.
All right. Well, we appreciate you listening so faithfully on AM 860 The Answer. How can we help you today, Cheryl?
Well, I'm calling because I didn't catch everything you had to say. I just happened to turn this on. But I was just suggesting that perhaps those who do not own a gun or have access to a gun also get some sort of information, background information, some sort of good informative pieces of information regarding weapons, because it does make a difference if you know something rather than nothing. And I have handled guns. I don't own one. I don't want to own one at this point in time in my life. But I think it's important to be able to look at that and say, oh, well, this is what this is capable of doing. This is what this might do. And it kind of loosens you up so that you're not as scared, and so that you can think about what might occur and how to react to something when you're looking down a barrel of a gun.
Well, Cheryl, before I turn it over to Senator Collins to provide additional comment to that, what I hear you saying is knowledge is power, and the more people know, the better off everyone is. Is that accurate?
Well, I would think that if it's accurate information, that it's worthwhile. And I think that knowing about weapons is very important.
Okay.
And I would not dismiss that, whether it's what kind of weapon it is. I'm not here to tell people that they can't own a weapon or carry a weapon. I'm not here to do that. My only concern is, of course, is how many massive shootings we do have. And that seems to be just way out of control. But, other than that, I think that being able to look at a weapon and instead of being, oh, I'm scared, I'm going to get hurt, it's looking at it and knowing what the potential is that it could do and what it might do, that you're looking at it and you know.
All righty.
So there is a big difference.
Okay, I'm going to have Senator Collins respond. Jay, your thoughts?
So first off, thank you for your question. I appreciate you being willing to step out and say that. And you're spot on, right? We have to be honest in our assessment of what things are and are not. The gun itself is a tool. It is an enabler. This is a very broad subject. And frankly, we could probably do 2 or 3 shows just unpacking this specific subject as you go further left and left on this issue. There are breakdowns in the fabric of our community that make the world less safe. I think many of those issues are at the root, the etiology of this. And to your point, yes, we have to openly discuss what is a gun, what is its potential. That's a part of going out there and getting trained and being educated on this. So I completely agree. I think that's something we should normalize. This should be something that all children are taught. Hey, look, this is a gun. This is how it works. This is how it does, without being afraid to be in the same room with it because they're afraid they're going to get shot. Ultimately, the gun's an inanimate object, right? It's the person behind the gun that is the issue. And that's frankly a place that we have to step into. One of the things I'm really adamant about is behavioral health. Look, as a Green Beret, we went through some really crazy times. There is post-traumatic growth. There is post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, you have to learn to balance those things. And we as a society have to come to grips with this stuff, clearly communicate the facts to your point. But we have to get left of this issue and solve some of the really underlying issues as well.
Well, Cheryl, we appreciate you calling in and have a great 4th of July weekend, okay?
You have yourself a safe one, and thank you very much.
God bless you,
Yes,
my dear.
ma'am.
All righty. 877-943-9673. Cheryl hanging up does open up the phone lines if you want to give us a call now. 877-943-9673. For those of you just joining us, we have in studio Senator Jay Collins, Senate sponsor of House Bill 543, the new permitless carry law in the state of Florida, which goes into effect today. And we did a recap at the top of the show regarding the legislation brought to us by Bianca the intern. And if you have a question, comment on any legal topic, but especially regarding this particular piece of legislation, 877-943-9673, 877-943-9673, or email me, Patrick at attorneypatricksmith.com. Before we go to Steve and Cape Coral, Bianca the intern has a thought. Bianca.
Yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to piggyback off of our last caller and your answer. So some advice that I've seen about if you're in a building where there may be an active shooter, there's a protocol that you should follow. So first would be hide. And if you can't hide, then you run. And if you can't run, you play dead. And if you can't play dead, then you attack. So I totally agree. I think that it's very important to at least be knowledgeable on how to handle a firearm. I went to Pompano Beach High School, and I remember being in school during Parkland, and that was about 10, 15 minutes away from me. And I remember being very scared and feeling like, you know what, I wouldn't be able to defend myself at all. So I'm happy to see that our schools are under much more protection now.
Bianca says attack last option. I had it number 1. I had attack number 1. So I had it wrong. I'm just making a note. Jay, you have something you want to add?
Yeah. So Bianca, you actually bring up something that's really interesting. So the other side of this, one of the things that I've been really adamant about is taking best practices from the special operations community to our community, right? So one of the things that we focused on was called emergency map data. Across our schools right now, many of the schools hadn't been remapped or they hadn't updated those in years and years. To say that it was not best practices is an understatement. They had secondary, tertiary, quaternary levels of information that just polluted the movement. So if you wanted to bring a soft target out of the school and bring hard targets in, i.e. law enforcement, it was very hard. The maps weren't oriented the same way. They didn't have clear instructions on how that process worked. So one of the bills we did this year, and I'm extremely proud of, we got $14 million in the budget. It redoes all of the mapping data across all the public schools in the state by county. So what it does is takes best practices, meaning they're all going to be true north. They'll have hard copies. They'll be given and posted within the school. They'll also have what we call alphanumeric grid reference, think battleship, right? Like we want to get people from C1 to F1. Here's the path and here's the route that works. A couple other things that this does is it ensures that these updated maps don't cost the schools additional money. They can't require our law enforcement to have new software. It has to be integrated to what they have, and it has to be given to the sheriff's office and our other law enforcement. So when you look at what we're doing with our public safety package that does have the constitutional carry provision in it, coupled with things we're trying to do, ultimately it comes back to giving people the right to defend themselves and their family and to keep those things we value the most that much safer. That is why this was a public safety package.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like more and more as we unpack this legislation, safety's the theme, much less so than possession of a firearm. I mean, that is the subject of the bill, but it seems like safety is sort of an overarching theme over the entire piece of legislation the more we get into the detail. 877-943-9673. That's your number to call in now and be part of today's show, just like Steve did. Steve, Cape Coral, thank you for your patience. How can we help you today?
Yeah, how y'all doing today?
Great, Steve. What's going on?
Not much. One of the things that I heard was a hindrance with concealed carry and medical marijuana card.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if I heard a little bit of it or a lot of it, but I know personally I had my medical card way before I applied for my concealed carry, and I had no issue whatsoever getting my concealed carry.
So, Jay, maybe speak to that.
Yeah, let's actually call in. I'll give you my number and let's talk about that one offline. I want to get details on your specific case. So can we do that?
So, Steve, what we'll do is before we hang up, I'll have Yumiko, the producer, pick up and get your number, and then we'll have Senator Collins call you.
I'll just give you, Steve, I'll give you my cell phone and we'll talk through that.
And it's Stephen. My real father is Stephen.
I'm sorry. Apologies.
All right. No.
Yeah.
My second piece is thank you for sponsoring the bill because I believe in a well-armed citizen group. But are we doing anything to fight against the FDLE for how long and how illegal they're being by getting background checks cleared?
Yeah, so ultimately, as you go through this, there is a timeline with this, and we are making sure that these background checks are going through in a cogent fashion. You know, FDACS is really being very thought out in their approach. I don't know if you've taken the time to go back and listen to Wilton Simpson talk on some of these subjects. He is knocking it out of the park in his approach to many of these things. So yes, we are making sure that these things are being done. There is a time, and you get an answer in a thought out, cogent process.
Okay.
Stephen, any follow up on that?
No, that's what I wanted to hear.
Stephen, what station are you listening on down in Cape Coral?
102.5 The Bone.
Oh, wow. I had no idea we reached all the way down there. Good for the
all
Bone.
the way down to Naples, brother.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. Stephen, we appreciate you listening and have a great, safe 4th of July, okay?
You too. God bless everybody. God bless America.
All right. God bless you. All righty. 877-943-9673. 877-943-9673. And just to take a little bit of a pivot, we're going to talk about some Supreme Court decisions that just recently came down this past week, actually. So one of the cases actually involves my alma mater, UNC, where I attended law school. So Harvard and UNC used a similar admissions process, which assigned numerical scores to multiple categories. In addition to considering students' grades, recommendation letters, extracurricular, Harvard and UNC also ranked applicants based on race. This is the subject matter for a lawsuit known as Students for Fair Admission versus UNC Harvard. Students for Fair Admissions sued Harvard and UNC, arguing that the use of race as a factor in admissions violated the Equal Protections Clause of the United States Constitution, which provides all citizens with equal protection under the law. Specifically, the lawsuits contend that the admission policies were discriminatory against Asian American applicants, and in the use of UNC, it was white applicants. So there's some background about the use of this, and it is regarding Regents of University of California versus Bakke, and the Supreme Court held in that case that it was unconstitutional for colleagues to reserve a certain number of spots for students based exclusively on their race. However, the court later ruled that race may be considered, along with other factors, in the admissions process if a two-step examination known as strict scrutiny is satisfied. Bianca, what's the opposite test? If we're not applying strict scrutiny, what's the test we're applying? This is pretty advanced law school stuff. It's rational basis. So, but the strict scrutiny standard requires that the racial classification further a compelling government interest. That's step one. And then number two, be narrowly tailored or necessary to achieve that interest. In Grutter versus Belinge, the Supreme Court upheld the use of race-conscious admission programs because they served a compelling interest in achieving diversity, but acknowledged that such policies must be limited in time. The court estimated the deadline at 25 years. That was in 2003, and this is according to CBS News. So on Thursday, what happened? The Supreme Court rejected the case of college admission, the college admission to make an applicant's race a piece of the admission process. The court ruled that both programs violate the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution and therefore unlawful. The vote in the UNC case was 6-3 and 6-2 in the Harvard case, in which Justice Brown Jackson was recused. The action across colleges and universities around the nation would follow for race-conscious admission programs at Harvard and UNC. Chief Justice Roberts wrote for the majority in, quote, both programs lack sufficient focused and measurable objectives, warranting the use of race, unavoidably employ race in a negative manner, involve racial stereotyping, and lack meaningful endpoints. Writing for the dissent, Justice Sotomayor said, the court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society. So maybe you have a thought on that. 877-943-9673. And I haven't forgotten the office line for those of you who want to schedule an appointment with me, yours truly, Attorney Patrick Smith, in the Sarasota, Sun City Center, Clearwater offices, any of our office locations. The office line again is 877-754-6764. Again, that toll-free office line, 877-754-6764, or just email me directly or visit the website and you can request an appointment. Again, the email address, patrick@attorneypatricksmith.com. So Jay, any thoughts on the decision made by the court on Thursday regarding Students for Fair Admission versus UNC and Harvard?
So actually, I applaud what was done on this. You know, when you look at this, do we want people categorized specifically and fundamentally based off the amount of melanin in their skin? I think all people have the same opportunity in our country. We can't legislate outcome, but we can legislate opportunity. And that's what we're making sure. Ultimately, I fundamentally believe that it's deeds, not words, and people should come in and be given the same opportunities regardless. I don't think it comes down to racial pieces. I was raised in a trailer. Economically, we had nothing. I was adopted by my grandparents. My mom had a 10th grade education. My father never got through junior high. He was a farmer, and people from my background, generally speaking, weren't successful. They never leave. We had alcoholism and drugs in my family, and many of the people I grew up with never got out of that. And I will tell you that that isn't because of race. I had friends from multiple races, all in the same boat as I was. It came down to the economic reality, the social stigmas, and the reality of how we educate and how we enable and empower people to get out of that. But race, I think, is something that we should take out of this equation.
And I want to throw it to Bianca and Lexi, because you guys obviously closer to the admission process than either Jay or myself. So what do you think of the Supreme Court decision? Bianca, go first.
So I think that the Supreme Court decision should have also addressed legacy admissions, because I feel the same arguments that are used to go against affirmative action can also be used to go against legacy admissions as
So
well.
you're saying if, I went to Harvard, my son wants to go to Harvard, you think there's a connection there?
Definitely. So I same kind of thing. People, I just think it boils down to fairness, and everyone should be given an equal shot, no matter where your mom or dad or grandpa went. So, I may be a little tad bit biased because I am in a minority group, but you know what? It is what it is.
Okay.
And as long as you work hard, I think that everything comes to you with patience and determination.
All right, Lexi, the intern, you had time to think about your answer because Bianca went first. Go ahead, Lexi. What are your thoughts on the Supreme Court ruling?
Absolutely. So, Bianca, you mentioned the legacy. I completely agree about the legacy. I think that I'm someone who is looking and beginning to apply for law schools really soon. And having that one factor, that's something that you can't control, definitely seems kind of like it can be an issue. I think that there are so many factors with applying to schools: your GPA, economic background, your test scores, your extracurriculars. There are so many things that go into your application. But however, there's also the part of your personal statement. If your race is something that did affect you, you experienced something that has built to who you are today, write down your personal statement. I think it's so much more impactful than clicking what your race is on one of the bubble formats.
For those of you not familiar, in law school application, there's something called a personal statement where you basically brag on yourself for a few pages. And that's what Lexi was referencing there, and basically saying that, your race is, if you're proud of your race, or your race is something you want to make mention of, the personal statement is the perfect venue for that. I think that's a great point. And I appreciate you ladies bringing that perspective as students to this ruling. And I think that, what they said in Grutter is probably accurate. This was done in 2003, that case. And they said there's going to be a timeline on this affirmative action. It's going to do its job of righting the ship in terms of racial equality. And so it's not an always and forever thing. It's something we need to revisit. And I sort of feel Thomas Jefferson smiling from above. Well, hopefully above. And I'm just kidding. So Thomas Jefferson saying, hey, great job relooking at legislation that we've had on the books for almost a quarter of a century, and maybe we need to tweak it one way. Jay, anything to add quickly?
Well, actually, I love your points, right? And it is personal narrative. No person is defined by their background. That doesn't limit what you can be. You aren't defined by the melanin or your racial profile. We are all God's children, and ultimately we have the same opportunities. And I love using the narrative and telling your story. That's brilliant. That's a great way to unpack that.
Well, write this number down for next week. This has been the Attorney Patrick Smith Show with our special guest, Senator Jay Collins, Senate sponsor of House Bill 543. Again, Bianca, great job doing your presentation on your bill. How do you think you did on your first radio appearance?
I think I killed it.
You did. I like the confidence. Jay, thank you so much for being here today. We hope you'll come back and not be a stranger to the show, and come back many times in the future. I know we can get some wonderful new legislation up for next session, and we can hopefully be discussing that on a future broadcast. So if you have a number, write this number down for next week, 877-943-9673 to reach me at the office during the week, 877-754-6764, 877-754-6764. This is Attorney Patrick Smith signing off, saying God bless the United States. Happy 4th of July, everyone.